Welcome to the Layton Construction Cold Storage Podcast. I'm Eric Ney. I'm the Executive Vice President of Layton Construction's National Building Group, and I'm excited to moderate today's conversation. I'm going to spend some time introducing the topic and then introducing our panelists, and then dive right into conversation. If you're an owner, developer, or operator of food, pharma, or cold industrial, this podcast's for you. If you're an industrial developer looking to jump into cold storage, or one of our architects or engineering partners in the space, or just a construction junkie like the rest of us, we hope you find a lot of value in this conversation as well. We're going to have some fun today. Cold storage is one of the fastest growing sectors in the industrial vertical. It's one of also the most technical and capital intensive in the industrial sector. Success requires experienced teams. It requires folks who've done this before and done this on scale. At Layton Construction, we've recently completed or are currently building 7 different cold storage facilities in 7 different regions or climates in the United States for 7 very different customers or product types of cold storage. As an example, we're building for one of the largest fast food chains in the world. We're also building for one of the largest coffee companies in the world. We're building for one of the largest pet food brands, where we're flash freezing cans of cat food. We're building for one of the largest grocers in America. We're also building a large-scale food distribution facility with multiple cold zones. We're doing a large national floral distribution center, just-in-time fresh food delivery company for consumers, direct to consumers. And finally, one currently in conceptual design is for a pharmaceutical distribution company. So the challenge and the beauty of cold storage is no 2 projects are the same. And our Layton Construction National Building Group, which all of our team members here are with that group today, have completed over 80 million square feet in the last 5 years. So why did we jump into cold storage? Well, we made that intentional decision 5 years ago because we believe in this vertical. We believe it requires sophisticated partners, sophisticated builders, and we believe we bring a creative solution to that vertical. So without delaying any further, with me is this outstanding panel of experts, my colleagues and my friends at Layton Construction. I'm going to let them introduce themselves and jump right in. First, I'll start with Thomas.
Yeah, good morning, Eric. Thanks for pulling this all together. Exciting to be here for a few reasons. One is we're in town. We have a groundbreaking tomorrow for a cold building here in town, which is really exciting. But also to talk more about this growth in this sector. I'm Thomas Gubbins. I'm a director for client relations and pre-construction, and really my job is to kind of go out to the marketplace, find the consumers and the customers that buy what Layton sells, qualify us, and then make sure that our team is giving them exactly what they need from the start of that first budget all the way through the final turnover. So really excited to be here and talk about the growth that we've had and kind of where our team is kind of continuing to push.
Christopher.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to be here. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I'm an architect by trade, and what I do for Layton Construction is manage the design efforts for their design build cold storage projects. Love it and love the team that I'm working with. Such a fast-growing sector, such an exciting sector because there's so many facets to it. And so thank you for allowing me.
Yeah. It's Sean Doherty. I'm on the project management side of the cold storage group as well as NBG. I've been doing this for 12 years now. 10 years was at Cisco Foods, so got to do a lot of ground up as well as a lot of production. And then 2 years were on the developer side. So I always get asked, it's like, why did you go back to construction? It's because I love what I do and love building buildings. So,
Mike?
I'm Mike George, Operations Vice President. That means that I'm doing my very best to keep track of our 150, 160 operations professionals between superintendents, project managers, project engineers, and the like, trying to deliver predictable outcomes. And I'm glad to welcome Sean back to the good side of the table, getting him onto the contracting side again. And yeah, we love cold. We love the precision. We love the details. We love everything there is to every facet of it.
You're herding the cats.
Yeah,
That's right.
Cats.
That's right.
Well, thank you all for being here. They're all humble folks, but this is a powerful powerhouse team, and we're grateful to have you on Team Layton and to really grow in this vertical for us. Let's start at the 30,000 foot view. Cold storage is moving fast and a growing sector. Give me a few words to describe this cold storage sector from each of you that kind of jump out at you that really describe, the energy around cold storage currently.
Yeah, I would say customization is a huge thing that comes up often with our customers and different prospective clients as we engage with them. Yeah.
I think that's key is like convertibility is huge in the market today. One of the things that we see is a growing privatization of cold storage. A lot of developers getting into the game. And so being able to offer a product that is convertible plus cooperative. Cooperative is another great word for the market because a lot of these facilities don't market just to one client. They're able to store anyone's product, for last mile fresh, delivery.
And customization and convertibility kind of seem like they're opposites, but really in this space, designing these very intricate, complex buildings,
Yes.
you still need the customization, but then to be able to later on down the road offer, that flexibility for developers to kind of pivot if somebody moves out or things like
Exactly.
that. So it's kind of both in a
Yeah.
in a
Just the
strange way.
longevity of the buildings to be able to market it that way.
Yeah.
So I would say also build to suit a lot of deals, especially on the developer side, they're trying to get thousands of deals, trying to pencil, and when they finally get one, the building has to be able to work for them. That's one of the biggest parts. And then depending on who the tenant is, you have a TI or a complete ground up that could be completely different from who they originally thought the project was going to be for.
Yeah.
But one thing that's common among all of them that I love about cold storage is just the passion that the user has. I've yet to walk a cold storage facility with an end user where they don't care deeply about the details, knowing, everything has got to be exactly correct for them to operate and function at their maximum efficiency. And it's contagious. You talk to them and they get excited about it, and that kind of spreads throughout the team. That's one of the things I love about cold.
Thomas, you lead much of our front-end national work with clients across the country, well before shovel hits the dirt. And any thoughts on the national landscape and insights from some of our customers nationally that are kind of currently in this space?
Yeah. Overall, it's like a really exciting industry to be in. There's a lot of potential growth both on the developer and end user side. We're seeing a lot of end users taking control of their own supply chain after COVID. They really want to own, for when they buy that piece of chicken until it gets into their stores. And then with developers too, they're extremely bullish on, building these ground up facilities, providing these customized solutions for these different kind of tenants that maybe don't have that CapEx expenditure to build these really expensive facilities, and providing those solutions for them. And so it's overall just a really exciting time to be helping with a lot of these deals, getting them off the ground, and then getting these folks into their facilities. It's been fun.
Right. Seeing as a lot of the developers are really jumping into it, and they're allowing a lot of these Fortune 100 companies to be able to concentrate on the business and not have to dump a bunch of money into that and depreciate it every year and putting it into a rental schedule that works for the client.
It's just a different beast. It's, Christopher once, it really kind of broke my mind free into understanding it a little bit better on racking space. It's almost like hotel rooms, right? Yep. And you want heads and beds, and you want pallets and pallet positions. And so you're able to give them the chance to really focus on their business. And I think on the dry side, not to, downplay the dry side, it's a little simpler to understand just how many racks high can we go and how many pallet positions can I get. On the cold side, the complexity of okay, how many forklifts do we have running? How often are the speed doors opening and closing? How do we keep the humidity correct? How do we keep the temperature right? How wide does our cold dock need to be to run everything? There's just a lot more that if you don't know and haven't done it, like Christopher and Sean and Mike, I think it's a big undertaking, and so leaving it to like professionals.
Well, there's
really
a myriad
helpful.
of factors too, Thomas, as far as like, you start, it's not just storage, but it's preparation of food to be stored.
Right.
Whether it's blast freezing, whatever it is, you have to understand your product type, how it needs to be frozen, or chilled. It's stuff coming in from a field, taking off field heat. There's all kinds of factors that go into how you store and how you chill that product that really impacts design. So
one question that dives into that is, are you seeing a rise in speculative cold storage, or is it always customized for one tenant, one purpose?
I would say it's a mix. You see a lot of speculative because what'll end up happening is you'll have an end user that'll run out of freezer space or run out of cooler space and need that instant need to be able to go to a 3PL or to another storage to just have an offsite storage because they don't have enough storage on site. So you'll see a lot of that in different cities. I know, like in Dallas, a couple years back, I was building a building for a produce production. They needed instant need for freezer. We had to go find somewhere to store all that extra product.
Right.
And then on the other side of it is a lot of the build to suit and making sure that they're obviously forecasting usually about 7 years out from when they're building the building originally. 2 years for construction, then 5 years of growth. And also finding.
Yeah, I think, we were talking a little bit earlier today about this where, the market's really seeing an increase in developers jumping in the game. Since 2019, the average rent for cold storage has gone up 96%. And that's due to the fact of lack of modern product. If you look at since 2020, the average cold storage facility is 40 years old, which is crazy to think about because of new technologies that have happened since then, and over half of them are 30 years old. And so developers are starting to get in the game, understanding that a lot of these companies, especially smaller companies that are coming out of the ground right now, the food kit companies, they don't necessarily have all the money in the world to be playing with. And so developers are adding to the game by building facilities that can allow them to deliver their product as fresh as possible, especially in that last mile. If you think about it, it's one thing to talk about keeping and maintaining product in a large warehouse that's insulated, but keeping and maintaining product on a truck that's not so insulated. And the market's realized that the closer you get that product to the end of its delivery route, that's where warehouses are being built. Smaller hubs.
Yeah. To build on that momentum, we've seen a lot of the average facilities are 40 years old. That's amazing. I didn't know that. But in the last couple of years, what has really been the momentum that you've seen, Sean, that's taken over the market, and where do you anticipate that to go the next few years?
So what we've been seeing is there's a lot of regional distribution centers, and then they will distribute out to, let's say, market hubs, kind of what Christopher was talking about. So they'll take their product, bring it to a main warehouse, and then they'll ship it out to the local warehouses, which allow us to get closer to the customers. So we're seeing a lot of that. And then, as well as Christopher was elaborating on, we're seeing the developers coming in and helping these smaller businesses by giving them by putting the funds into long-term leases that allow them to get to the facility, allow them to do get their product, and then be able to really have an end good that they're being able to distribute. So on top of that, we do have the larger companies that are kind of in a I don't want to say like a weird zone, but they're looking at doing rentals because they want to put the money back into their business, or they are looking at buying the land and building new build-to-suits for replacing those 40-year-old facilities because, as we all know, renovations cost a lot of money, going in and trying to find the the bad things that have been going on for 40 years. A lot of those buildings are at end of life, and now they're trying to get into new areas and trying to do emerging markets and stuff like that. So
we're building one here in Salt Lake that really is the epitome of this discussion, for a large fast food restaurant. And they've realized that, they took, control of their distribution because they realized that, they needed to be closer to each of their stores. Each of these distribution centers services about 40 of their stores, where each of those stores gets 1 to 2 deliveries a day from that facility. And so it's making it easier for them to make sure that the product that they deliver to each of their stores is fresh as possible.
So, Christopher, you've been designing cold storage facilities or food processing facilities for close to 30 years. What have you seen has been the biggest change in design to make these more convertible, to make these more utilitarian for the customers today versus, the 10 or 20 years ago? What's hot and fresh today?
It's an understanding of details. It's an understanding of refrigerant. What refrigerant allows you to be as flexible as possible, for a space. Each refrigerant has its pluses and minuses, and each system has its pluses and minuses. And so right now we see a rise of systems that are prepackaged, that come to site, deliver to site, that make it easier to really focus refrigeration on smaller spaces, which allows, a developer to really convert those spaces to different temperatures, which is huge. In the past, you've seen a lot of ammonia type based systems, which are great and efficient for really large spaces, not so much for small spaces. We have different refrigerations coming on for that. Another thing that's really made a big impact in the industry is the rise of rack supported ASRS type facilities. If you think about this, you mentioned it, or Thomas, maybe you mentioned it, the whole idea of hoteling, for product. When you have a rack supported building that is 110 feet tall, that's all automated, it makes it so much easier to store products, not for just one client, but for many clients.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard from a lot of our customers, working in a, 0-degree windowless freezer is a tough job. There's a lot of turnover.
There's a lot of turnover.
A lot of turnover. And so
you gotta like winter. You gotta like winter.
Be able to keep people, in a warm office, running those systems rather than running forklifts and having to go, fetch frozen goods all day. It's cutting down on that turnover. So there's.
Well, you're from the Midwest. You love that -10, right?
Yeah. No, I moved to Dallas, so not there we go. Not so much.
Brought to you by Wisconsin. Building on that a little bit more, our design build in-house, I get asked all the time, do you have architects in-house that stamp your drawings and that certify, the process? My answer is quickly, we have architects and engineers in-house, but we intentionally manage that as design build, and our architect and engineering partners are outside of Layton. Can you explain that a little bit more about how we approach that?
Yeah. So, and I've been on both sides of the table. I have been the stamping architect or an architect that has been doing the drawings in-house for other companies. I love the way Layton does this because it allows us the flexibility of finding local groups that understand markets, for one. It allows us to go and find architects and design groups that understand the product 100%. And are interested in maintaining, an understanding of forthcoming technologies, how to better detail the space, and that's what we're really looking for in design groups. We have several really good teams that we do have, that we have partnered with. We're looking and continue to look for, teams to partner with in different markets. Right now, one of the biggest things for cold storage is really understanding how that building is built. Sean and I were talking about this just the other day, where you have, for us, a preference of doing a building out of insulated metal panel because it allows for instant tie in a vapor barrier at the roof, and at the subslab on the exterior of the building. Here in our market, we see a large majority, and throughout the nation, it's changing because developers are getting into the game.
The convertibility factor.
It is. It's that, and it's the investment.
Right.
When a developer builds a building, they want a bulletproof exterior, which means tilt to them. It's easier to finance tilt from what I've heard as well. And so when you have a tilt building that's uninsulated on the exterior wall, those details at the roof and at the subslab become even more critical to tie in the vapor barrier and make sure you maintain, a very tight system.
It's all about those partnerships and being able to find the right subs and the right team to be able to identify those potential fail points early, and then really call out who has what.
Well, I give these three a lot of credit back to your original kind of question on, having the right designers.
Mm-hmm.
These three have gone out, listened to our customers. Christopher's brought in past relationships, and I think we have a really, really strong stable of specialized architects now that are regional, that have cold focus. We have a partner that only does cold TIs in food production. So talk about being super specialized. So we're still looking for more partners as we continue to ramp up. But you guys have done a really great job of finding the right folks that that can service our needs.
One of the bigger challenges is not even ground up, but if you look at how much of cold storage is being implemented in existing buildings that weren't built for cold storage, that's when everything gets super tricky. Right. How do you handle those details? How do you make sure that you're remodeling in a way that they understand that they're able to maintain their vapor barrier? Yeah. It's huge. We're doing that in the city of industry right now. We're going through those exercises, box in a box, having to rip out, existing slabs, wood.
Wood truss building. That was
the more complicated, the better.
Paper mill or something. Yeah. No, for sure.
Well, let's get into the specifics of refrigerant systems and really customizing that aspect of the business. Sean, I'd like to go to you. Can you break down the most common refrigeration systems and then where they typically be installed? What are the pros and cons?
Yeah.
Oftentimes some of our audience is going to be industrial developers who haven't got into this space but really want to break into this space. So the first question is, okay, I'm in Phoenix or I'm in Vegas or I'm in Reno or I'm in Cali. What system should we use? What are the pros and cons of those? Could you kind of give an undertone of that, please?
Yeah, not a problem. I would say there's a big three. So you have ammonia, which obviously has a lot of pros and cons. You have CO2 and then synthetics. With synthetics, we're kind of in a weird environmental kind of phasing out of the traditional R22 Freon. Right now, as of this year, we're not allowed to install new R22 units. But, of course, everyone's going to adapt and come up with a new synthetic refrigerant. And that's what we're seeing across the market. So everyone's pivoting very quickly to get away from it, to be able to install all these new units. I'll just start with the synthetics. The positives are they're great in small spaces. So when you see a lot of package units in a lot of small rooms, say 20,000 square feet and less, you can put a package unit and be able to really optimize that space with a smaller unit, smaller power demand, and a lot of different items like that. You can also, we have a lot of great partners that do just synthetics. And then as we move into the CO2s and the ammonias, they're a lot larger. CO2, it's a natural occurring. They're great in cold climates. It loses a little bit of energy efficiency as you move further south into the warmer climates. It is a high pressure unit, so it is operating at a higher pressure, which can lead to potential leaks. Granted, it's not a toxicity item. It's just more of a leak and then a higher component cost.
For maintenance.
A couple things too with that. I think a lot of people think CO2 is a new refrigerant. CO2 is actually the oldest refrigerant that has been used. A lot of it, CO2 was used in groceries to chill all their cold boxes for ice cream and milk and such. What we see now is being able to take CO2 into a much larger spaces, and up front, maybe a
It's a
little
higher-
bit more expensive, but
Correct.
operationally less
is.
expensive.
Correct.
Over time.
And in some of the, I guess we'll call it earthier markets,
Correct.
California, Oregon, Washington,
Definitely.
Denver, there seems to be a little less pushback when it comes to CO2 units.
Oh, for sure.
Getting
It's
those,
environmental friendly.
exactly, yeah, getting
It
those,
ticks that box.
exactly, getting those permitted. And,
Yeah. I actually had a project for one of the largest, cold storage groups in the country in California. And that's the reason it got denied. They had an existing facility. They wanted to increase the facility and the township didn't want it,
Yeah.
So the
And so
quick take-
there are issues with that.
Yeah.
That you don't have with Freon.
Right.
Or CO2.
Right.
So the quick takeaway is we have CO2, ammonia, and synthetics, and depending on the region and the age, Jay, and the preference of the tenant,
Right.
we can be customizable and convert that to whatever system best fits their tenant.
Well, it also comes down to maintenance too, especially for developers.
Yeah.
If you're a developer, you build a building and you have several tenants in there, you have to figure out who's going to operate it. Who's going to operate that system? Who's going to, in times that it might go down, who's responsible? And you want your hands as free as you can from that. And so it really comes down to maintenance with a lot
Right.
of this.
And then, for example, for ammonia systems, you have to have a PSM program. You have to have operators that are trained for a certain amount of time and have a certain level of skills as well as a cost. It's a very expensive person.
Yeah, not all the
Sorry.
systems are not all the systems are like your thermostat.
Yeah, exactly.
There are those options,
Yeah.
but not all of them.
But
are
it,
like
it
that.
sounds like for a developer, if you want to maximize flexibility, if you want to have hands off as far as maintenance,
Right.
the synthetics are kind of the way to go. But there is generally a higher price,
upfront cost.
maybe per square foot, because I'm sure that once you get to really big systems, all of a sudden ammonia and CO2 probably starts looking more appealing.
Right. That was one of the big things back in the day. Was ammonia was the most cost effective, especially up front. So, and I mean, they last forever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're seeing in a lot of the facilities that are 40 and 30 years old. They're all ammonia systems.
For sure.
It also takes up a large footprint, and that's rentable space to a developer. So, I mean, they're looking for package units that you can either put up on the roof or take up the least amount of space.
Or on site. Yeah.
Or on site, yeah.
Put a
Makes
rack
sense.
on site.
Yeah.
One comment you made earlier was convertibility. I was at the NAOP Icon West conference in Long Beach, and we went to look at one of the first speculative cold storage projects ever built. It was a Lineage facility at the Port of Long Beach.
Yeah.
And the ability to refrigerate different zones, have a deep freeze zone, have a moderately 20 to 30 degree zone, and then have grocery zone. Can you kind of speak about the different cold zones in a building, and then and how do we design for that convertibility in future use?
Yeah, it really comes down to, first and foremost, your vapor barrier. If you're talking about convertibility and you want to be able to manage temperature ranges that stem, all the way down to -20 for like an ice cream storage, on up to cold storage for stuff like vegetables, and other products that don't need to be frozen but are right there at that threshold.
36 to 45, yeah.
You need to understand, first and foremost, that vapor barrier needs to be in place. If you ever think that's going to be in any way, shape, or form frozen, you need to address the subslab thermal, assembly, meaning insulation, glycol, underslab, to avoid any kind of, heaving from freezing the ground. You need to, address those same kind of details up at the roof level. Is it a box in a box? Which a lot of people go to with convertibility because it's the easiest. That also poses challenges, though, because a lot of people want to get as much clear height out of a space as possible. And so when you talk about box in a box, you're talking about adding cost to a building because you have to make your building taller in order to reach some of these, and that threshold of clear space is getting taller and taller every year.
What do you think you lose on clear height? when you go to a box? Is it 2 feet, 4 feet?
It's about 7 feet.
It's about
feet, okay.
7 feet.
Yeah, that's, that's pretty substantial.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially if you're in a 32-foot clear building.
Yeah, you're down to realistically,
25.
your stack height's probably about 22.
Yeah.
And it's not just the ceiling, but then, there's a ceiling and you have to have a certain distance from top of product to your
Sprinkler system, your lights, everything like that.
It impacts a ton.
Yep.
So,
Something to be a part of and have a design team that can help look at what is your ultimate goal. It's like often a lot of our industrial buildings, we're just building the walls and skin around the MHE they have inside of these facilities that are so complex and sophisticated, similar to cold storage. I mean, you mentioned we're building projects that are swing 60 degrees, ice cream at -20, vegetables at 45. That's a tremendous swing. And so to have a project that you can convert and customize is so important. Shifting over to operations and project delivery, this is obviously a niche product. And we're always asked for cold storage experienced teams. And as I mentioned earlier, we made a concerted effort in being very intentional on hiring and building out our design build teams, building out our expertise in cold storage, because it takes a unique individual. Mike is the VP of operations. Why is real field experience so important in cold storage?
I mean, just knowing the end from the beginning, having somebody that's done the repetitions. If they've been there, if they've gone through the process start to finish, then they're able to lead. They're able to provide that leadership from the very beginning. Talk to the right people at the right time in the process, and then make sure that those people are implementing or developing the project in the right order, and developing a QA/QC program to inspect what they've actually done. If you've already walked that path, you're miles ahead of anybody that has never not walked that path. There's just no replacement for it.
And what makes a bad cold storage project go wrong, right? I mean, there's always something. We hear horror stories from our customers all the time that say,
How much time do you have?
but we hear all the time from our customers, hey, if this GC would have only done this, and it would have avoided all these other problems. What are kind of some of those examples? And contrarily, what are the 1 or 2 things we do or we strive to do at Layton to keep that from happening?
Well, I said at the beginning, it's exciting to work with cold storage clients because they're so passionate. They know exactly what they want. It gets really complicated when they don't know what they want, when they're not setting an expectation. So in order to really kind of flesh that out and give your team the best chance of success, you've got to spend meaningful time with that owner. You got to spend meaningful time with them. Where you're talking about whether their priority is flexibility, or maybe they know exactly what they need, so that you can develop a plan that you can execute. I always tell everybody that it all starts with understanding what the scope is, and then understanding what the schedule is, because that everything springs off of that.
Yeah.
The other thing too, regarding ops is making sure that the team that you have understands, not only from the design side, but from the operation side, the speed at which design build projects have to move, and you can't be coaching people necessarily, especially through the design process, at that speed. They have to know what they're doing. They have to know how to approach the client, ask the right questions, so they understand what, the needs are for that individual cold or frozen space.
Right. I would elaborate on that by saying, from personal experience, I have a very obviously different path to where I am now. Being on the owner side, being able to pull some of those different operational practices, and something that we do very well here is we sit down, like Mike was saying, with the end tenant and kind of talk through, let's go through a day in the life. Let's figure out how you're going to run your facility.
Exactly.
And that way we can help them get to that end goal. And without that, you end up with a lot of the fail points or a lot of the lingering design problems that you can have, because like you said, if they don't know, they don't know. And that's where we kind of step in to help them figure out how they want to get to that end goal.
Yeah, I think, if you can look at that end goal, go walk an existing facility with them. Hopefully this isn't their first one. and they've got others. But if it is their first one, then find a like product that we have access to and walk that facility. Really do everything that you can to help visualize what the end product is going to be. I mean, that's where I feel like Layton really outshines most of the other general contractors. Is we have an incredible visualization department that's all in-house. We create incredible 3D renderings that show exactly how assemblies need to go together, and then we're flying our sites every single day with a drone, and we're making that footage available so that in the OAC meetings every single week you're talking about what the progress looks like on site. Talking about, hey, here's that list of critical details that we wanted to review, and in the next 3 weeks, the next 6 weeks, these are those topics that are coming online in the construction process. Yeah. And so it just, I mean, we always talk about communication, but having more visibility, more visual aid to see what's actually happening, I feel like is. I mean, you can be successful without it, but it sure makes the road a lot less bumpy when you've got access to that kind of stuff.
For sure.
So we roll our sleeves up, try to get to know the product type, try to really get to know the owner and what they want in their facility, and then are transparent and a practical partner at the same side of the table trying to achieve their goals. So I appreciate all that feedback. How is safety showing up in this work, and particularly given the demanding environments?
Well, I mean, you always hear people say safety first. I like to think of safety more like, hey, it permeates through everything that we do. Understanding what the plan is so that you can customize your safety plan around the construction. It needs to permeate every aspect from the new laborer walking onto the site and understanding, hey, what does ready and fit for duty look like? To the 30-year vet that has been there so many times and he's heard the same song and dance so many times that he could probably repeat it, getting him engaged. It all has to do with that planning aspect. And I view that safety as exactly like I view the production. You got to know what your plan is, and then you've got to develop that plan, and then you've got to implement that plan.
Layton went from 0.77 EMR, I think like 5 or so years ago, to 0.68, 0.63, 0.58, and now I believe we're 0.55. It's a tremendous direction that the company's heading, and we're really proud of it, but we're not there yet. You're on our National Leadership Council and really driving that forward. What's driving that improvement, if you had to kind of put your finger on it?
Well, we've got kind of a buzzword inside Layton called our leading indicators, right? And all that is simply, hey, we want to look retrospectively. We want to look back and learn from past mistakes, but more importantly, we want to be looking forward and identifying things that could be a problem. And so you're right, that EMR rating, I mean, most companies, as their hours go up, their EMR kind of just follows that. As our hours have gone up, we've seen less recordables, less lost time incidents. And we attribute that, I mean, it's good leadership, but it's also that leading indicator component, getting out there and making it mean something to the professional that's installing the product. And I attribute it mostly to that, just that pre-planning aspect.
Yeah, and I'll give Eric and Kurt Thomas and myself a little credit on the pre-con side too, which you don't think about a lot of times with safety. But Eric and I have been fortunate to find a lot of owners that care about safety, which is huge. And that trickles down to Kurt Thomas, who's our VP of pre-con. He oversees about 15 of our really, really talented estimators. They will only engage with certain subs that have certain safety records as well, so right off the bat, foundationally, you're getting hopefully a good sub-partner that's bought in to safety, a good owner that's bought into safety, and then that translates into the field where y'all care about safety a ton. So it's really helped culturally drive that number down for sure.
Yeah, there's no surprises to a subcontractor. By the time we get to the actual mobilization date, there's no surprises on what the safety culture is going to be.
Right.
Yeah. And that is a lot. I mean, I don't like to give you all the credit, but
never would take it.
But credit where credit's due. That is because pre-construction business development starts those conversations early.
Yeah.
And so there are no surprises when it comes time for execution.
Well, it's actually finding good subs too and good trade partners to work with, in each market, which I think NBG is really good at.
Yeah.
We have a really broad, footprint and understand markets outside of Utah, mostly outside of Utah being MBG, and I think that's been critical to our success.
The most important objective on any construction project, whether you're building a hospital or a data center, cold storage, or your family kitchen at home, is are you on time and are you on budget? And we personally were like 50% over target, so I don't even know what I'm talking about. What are the keys to hitting schedule and budget on a cold storage job? Because, these design build projects, not everyone does those. When I said that we had done 80 million square feet, we intentionally jumped into cold storage because there's a lot of contractors who can build a plain vanilla box. And it gets a lot smaller pool of qualified, sophisticated builders when you're building a multi-zone, refrigerated, 60-degree swings, complex, customized cold storage facility. And so how do we make sure we hit schedule and budget once we hand, you and Sean a project to go execute on? What are your keys to success?
I'm going to make a little sports analogy here. I'm not a big sports guy.
I can't wait to hear it.
So, you don't want your team touching the ball for the first time in the playoffs, right? I mean, they need to have a lot of practice, a lot of games under their belt before they ever get to the playoffs. And I view our key to success, or touching the ball or the repetitions as interim milestones. Little small milestones that they're not just meaningless. They mean something, but they're less important than maybe the substantial completion or the drawdown phase, or they give you the opportunity to allow that team to have some experience where there's a little bit of stress, a little bit of pressure to achieve success, but they're doing it in somewhat of a controlled environment. And so I really value those interim milestones, deciding, hey, what are the string of events that are really important to our job, so that if you do have a weather delay, on one of our jobs just recently, we had a huge impact, and the soil on site struggles a little bit, to put it lightly. But everybody on that team knows that in order to recover from that rain event, we have to be doing something by June 23rd. And they all know exactly what that is. And if we can hit that date, then we've substantially recovered that weather impact that we had. And everybody's pulling together because they know that's the line in the sand for recovery. If you don't have that, and you're testing your team's resolve to hit a milestone on the most important, the very last milestone, it's like sending a practice team into your playoff game, and to me, it doesn't make any sense.
I love the example. Sean?
I would agree with that sports analogy. I would say, in addition, it's really identifying the different areas that are potential fail zones and having those meetings up front, especially with your key design partners, as well as your subs. So, it's getting everyone involved in a room, talking about whose ownership it is, and then really planning that out. And it's not just, pre-test plan, but you're also having all your pre-mobilization meetings and everything like that before everyone's on site. Let's get it figured out before you're actually doing it day of. So the last thing you need is to be up on a forklift or a scissor lift and then trying to figure it out while you're up there.
Yeah. You guys do a great job at all the planning and the complexity of cold and why you need a sophisticated contractor. You have that added, longer lead items like with refrigeration equipment. I was talking with Eric at Alta the other day. He's like, there's only a certain amount of cranes in North America we really use to put our units on top of our facilities. And so I need to know where those are at all times to make sure when it's time to put the units on, they're going to be on your site on the exact day. It's just another layer of coordination and, just being super dialed in and, the schedule down to the final day for the full 12 months. And it's just super critical on these jobs.
Right.
Well, I think there's also something to be said for adding value to a project. Because let's face it, We've all had budgets, and those budgets are based on certain key factors that impact design. You look at clients that have to go through FM process, or you look at clients that are looking to shoot for some kind of LEED certification. And it's understanding how to get them there for the most value, in that project, and understanding how to design, and not, necessarily looking at it from the most cheapest route to go, but what's going to be the best for the client at the time.
I like that. Yeah.
It's communication.
Yeah.
So, Thomas, you're currently working on the front end of 4 or 5 different cold storage projects right now that are in pre-construction. What's setting apart, Layton in the cold storage space right now, and how can we even provide more value for our customers?
Yeah, it feels like 400 or 500 sometimes. Yeah, I know it's probably a cliche answer, but I truly believe in our people. I could sell construction anywhere, and I've kind of really found my home at Layton and MBG because of the people that we work with across the table, out in the field right now. In the cubicles, pulling together budgets. Our people do really, really care. They want to build long-term relationships with customers. Being in the National Building Group, our goal is to be a solution for you across the entire country. We're not just, a one-off project, here in Salt Lake, where if we mess up, we got our fee and good luck as you go build in LA. No, we need to take lessons learned places. We need to deliver on the first one so we can go build for you in Dallas, in Atlanta, in North Carolina, up in New York. And so we've created a great culture of people who care and understand that, our goal is to do multiple projects with customers.
So Sean, are you seeing some emerging tech? I know a big question around podcasts and when we go to conferences in construction industry or the AGC, we talk about the automation. We talk about, advanced systems and computer systems within our building automation. And then we talk about AI and logistics. How is that starting to impact in construction now, and what's coming next?
We're definitely seeing the building types start to change. We're seeing a lot more ASRS, so the automated systems, and we're seeing the building heights get taller, as well as sometimes the building footprint shrinking, just land availability.
Right.
So all of a sudden you're driving down the road and you see a building that's 110 feet up, but obviously it's not being man-picked anymore. You have the automated systems basically flying up to that height, pulling the specialized product, and then bringing it back down to palletize. We also are seeing a lot more of the narrow aisle racking systems. Once again, you're being able to get a lot more pallet positions in a smaller footprint because you're not having to have drive aisles anymore. So you're not having to worry about 2 forklifts passing each other. It's a single forklift, single direction, but also going up 55 feet in the air.
We just did one of those in Arkansas for a pet food company, and I walked in and I was like, "Oh, well, did the racking go?" No, this is that narrow. I'm like, "Oh, okay, great. This is really cool." And they kind of explain and walk through it all. It really helps optimize.
It does.
Yeah.
So it's more specialized MHE equipment. It's going to the robotics, and it's all about how do I maximize the number of pallet positions? And I mean, realistically, that's where these companies are making money.
It's return on investment.
Right.
Yeah.
It really is.
Utilize as much space as you can in each of your facilities.
For sure.
So pulling that back to design, given the specialized nature and what are kind of the most common challenges or pitfalls we're seeing in design of a cold storage facility, we understand the modern need for convertibility, customizing the facility, being more driven towards e-commerce, so quick exchange of goods. How are we looking at that differently in design to avoid those pitfalls that maybe we ran into in the past?
It's a good question. I think a lot of it comes down to understanding, especially with, delivering spec space. You have to understand when you're building a spec building, it comes down to structure. We talked about narrow aisles. We talked about, we're going from 11.6 down to, 8, sometimes, 7.6, in some facilities. and even narrower if they have moles. And so understanding structure and the bays and, how you're building that, in a way that's the most flexible for the MEG teams. When they come in, they have to rack a space. It's huge, and trying to dial that in at times when you don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to read the crystal ball.
It is, and how do you address that? And really it's understanding what the coming trends are,
How do you factor in long-term operational costs into the design? Obviously, a developer that might, we work with one developer who's got, $800 or $900 million fund built just for cold storage facilities. They want to hold these for 20 or 30 years. It's much different than a tenant that's leasing space for 10 to 12. And so how's Layton Construction building in these operational factors into our design?
Again, it's operational efficiency comes first and foremost, I think, down to refrigeration. You look at the different systems and the different, ways of refrigerating spaces. We talked about Freon. Freon doesn't use water. It's a water-free system,
Right.
Which is huge, and you look at how that saves money, and even though you look at artificial refrigerants as a way of, impacting maybe global warming, we're looking at more efficient artificial refrigerants. But if you look at the impact it has on not, using local water, it's huge,
Right.
and that's just one.
Yeah, and I mean, with an ammonia system, they're using water for cooling. So you're having your water bill's going through the roof as well as your electrical bill.
Yeah. CO2 uses a little water, and so, it starts to become, you look at the effectiveness, and the implications of that, how much energy does it take to refrigerate, which is huge.
Right. And what we're seeing is a lot of, these spec buildings, there is typically a higher upfront cost for when they're putting in these the synthetic refrigerants. For example, we're seeing a lot of developers put in Alta units. Alta units are great. You can get the convertibility, but they have a great maintenance plan. Once it's in, they don't really have to touch it. Yeah. And they're able to just call them, hey, go do the regular maintenance, and that's it. As a developer, that's a huge win for them because you're not having to have a guy on staff or on your property management team that's going out there and doing the maintenance all the time. So,
it even gets down to the fact that they can, from Atlanta, maintain your temperatures.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You're not even having to do that.
Yeah, I toured their facility.
It's impressive.
It's really cool what they have going on.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
All right, as we kind of wrap up, I'm going to hit each of you with a question and a quick answer. Sean, if you could solve one challenge in cold storage construction, what would it be?
I would probably say vapor details. If I could have a solve all for that or some product that I could magically put up there and solve all of the vapor problems, be a rich man. But that would be the one thing that I would see is if there's something that can instantly solve vapor issues.
I think one thing I've thought about a lot is how to develop a concrete that's self-insulating.
Ooh, that's a good one.
You really look at it, you can drive on insulation, right? We're getting to that point where, that insulation's holding that pressure. So why can't we do that with concrete? Where is that development happening?
Because without having to do like a thermomass panel.
Exactly.
Love it. Thomas, we're actively doing pre-construction, for cold storage projects, I think in 7 different states right now.
Yeah.
What's the goal of our cold storage team moving forward?
Yeah, this time next year, I'm hoping we're building in, 14 states in cold. Hoping these 7 different projects that we're building, we're on to our next one, with them. And we're already looking at new projects with some of these, with these end users and developers. So, the goal is to keep growing, but the goal is to keep growing strategically with, you and me going out and finding owners that buy what Layton is selling, which is, a quality team, number, schedule, design product that, that we can take across the country with them. So not just doing cold to just do it, but to to do it intentionally and be a part of our business unit. I had a customer told us when we got brought on board, I said, thank you so much for this opportunity. We appreciate it greatly. And he said to me, he's like, we appreciate you. You guys have a choice in who you get to build for. And I never really thought of it that. I've never had a customer say that to me, but it is true. We do have a choice of who we do business with. And so, I just see us adding to our, already awesome group of customers and just keep growing our footprint, intentionally.
Thank you. Mike George, with materials and, costs and supply, how do you manage budget stability, from conceptual design to a GMP? Obviously, there's things we can't control, but the things that we can, and we can be intentional about it, how can we hold that budget stability from conceptual to GMP? What are some key ways we can do that?
It's always the same story. We want fast buyout. If the faster we can buy a job out, get released to actually lock product in, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that there's not gonna be a tariff or something that takes effect there, and there might be a little bit of a challenge with the sub to hold the price. But what that buyout does do is it releases them to get an actual PO in place. And the earlier you can get that first PO in place, then if there ever is an escalation, you can ask for the updated PO and compare the two and put it, not to say, oh, we put the onus on the sub, but in reality, if they're asking for the additional funds, they need to provide some element of proof, right? It can't just be the White House tweet. They need to be able to show, hey, this was the original PO, this is the current PO, and kind of justify that. So being able to get those funds released and getting contracts in place is critical.
Well, and that goes to design, though, too, in the pre-con effort, and understanding what you might need to procure early.
Yes.
And design that project in a way that you can meet that, especially now in the market we're in, steel packages, stuff like that, where if we understand exactly what we're dealing with and get that designed as quick as possible, we can get it, to Mike and his teams, in order to procure that, and get the POs out.
All about that goal that we have of predictability and reliability to our 100%. Customers. So what do you enjoy most about designing and building cold storage? I want to finish with this question to each of you. What is your favorite thing about building cold storage, and why do you do it? Mike?
Taking an empty site that is, meaningless to the community, to the industry, and turning it into something that is high efficiency, turning our communities into what we want them to be, I love being able to drive by a job that we've built, take pride in what it is, go visit it years after. One of my jobs had an earthquake, and the epicenter was right underneath the building. And it was cool to just to be able to go into that facility, evaluate, hey, how did our structural design hold up, and hold our heads high when it did what it was supposed to do, So exactly. I love construction, and cold storage just adds another layer of complexity and precision that I can't get enough of.
Sean?
No, I'd have to agree. And the driving past the facilities, whether or not your kids are interested, when you point it out to them, like, hey, I built that building. If they ever look up for their iPad or say, oh, cool, Dad, let's move on to the next one. But I would say it's the complexity, it's the partnerships with a lot of the trade partners, and going in and working through a lot of the hard problems.
Yeah.
And really wrapping your mind around it, and taking that challenge head on. I mean, that was why I got in construction, be able to do those challenges and then really have something tangible at the end of the day. That's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, and I actually gonna, take it a little different route. And one of the things that really got me into it and really held my interest is feeding the world. We're growing at such a fast pace as far as population, and we have to maintain, a global chain to feed the world, and we're part of that. That's huge. I mean, that's really cool to think about.
Absolutely.
Jeez, Christopher, we're not responsible selfish.
Look, kids, well, Christmas feeding all the kids.
Mine won't be as profound as that either, but I like to think that, we're kind of leading a lot of the construction out west. I've found a lot of owners are looking for good contractors that can build these complex building out west, because a lot of that fraternity is down there. But I do really love getting to know and having a great relationship with our trade partners, and then also they all just know the owners as well, and it's a great way to hold everybody accountable. It creates a more inclusive design process, pre-con process. It's my favorate part of being in that world.
Definitely is a huge industry. It also feels
very small.
Very
Yeah.
small. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you again to all of our listeners and to our incredible panel. Cold storage is a very dynamic and complex vertical within industrial. It's a high stakes game, and it's a game where Layton Construction is here to stay and here to play in. Thank you for listening, and have a great week.